Hello everyone, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink, and this is one of 6 cards I made this afternoon for this week's Color Throwdown Challenge. As usual, I am last minute, and yeah, rather than make one, as I was cutting down this watercolor paper, I'm like, oh, I can get 6 pieces out of this. Why don't I just make 6? So I trimmed down, this is just a piece of Canson XL watercolor paper. So I cut down the pieces into A2 size. So they're all 4¼ by 5½ inches. And I've got the 6 of them. And then I've got my favorite things. This is the Flashy Florals stamp set that I have been dying to use for so long now. So that was also another reason why I made 6, because I'm like, I really want to just really use it. So I'm stamping the flowers and the leaves. I chose 2 of the solid flowers from the set and the solid leaf image. And I'm just stamping them onto the watercolor paper with my favorite things, dye ink. And I'm not worrying about the ink being perfect because I want to splatter this all with water. I'm also not worrying about getting ink all over my craft mat, which will get on the back of the cardstock. But because it's watercolor paper and it's a thick watercolor paper, it's not going to seep through or do anything. I don't really care. I was wiping up between colors just so I don't muddy up my lighter ink pad there. And I just use baby wipes for that. And I do everything in steps. So I stamped all the orange flowers first, then I stamped all the pink flowers, and then I stamped all the green leaves, and just quickly wiped off my craft mat there in between each color with a baby wipe. And then I took each piece and I sprayed it with water. Now I knew it would react a little bit with water because they are dye, like a water-based dye ink. I wasn't expecting it to react this crazily or this much. And I was really glad it did because it turned out even better than I was thinking in my head. I loved how much it moved. And I'm using my distress sprayer. Any regular, water sprayer would work with something like this. But I'm glad I had the distress sprayer because just the way it sprays the water, it really helped it to move even more. And I just sprayed it and I would let it sit for not very long at all, like maybe 10, 15 seconds, not even, because you can see how just the minute the water touches it, the ink starts to move. So really fun. I'm glad I did so many because each one is different. It's so fun. So between each piece, after I'd sprayed it, I was just using paper towel there to sop up some of that extra water and ink because I didn't want the colors to really like muddy into each other. And also it would take forever to dry otherwise. So I did all that, wiped down my surface again because everything was soaking wet. And then while everything was still damp because they hadn't fully dried, I started stamping one of the smaller flower images with this lighter pink lemonade ink just because the lighter ink, it started to kind of fade into it and I wanted the pink to be a little more prominent. This step ended up being kind of redundant, not necessary, but yeah, I did it anyway. So I stamped all the little flowers and then decided to stamp the detail images from the set. And same thing, everything is still slightly damp, not, the cardstock isn't soaking wet. If it was still really, really wet, stamping the detail images would be completely pointless. They would just, bleed out. But it was just damp enough that they bled out a tiny, tiny little bit and kind of softened, and yet dry enough that you could still see the detail, which you can see better at the end in the pictures. And I'll have pictures on my blog, close-ups and all that fun stuff. But I really love, especially the leaf one. The detail on these stamps is just so perfect. So I did the exact same thing I did before. I did everything all at once. So I stamped all the detail leaves, and then I go in and stamp all the orange detail pieces for the orange flowers. And this time, obviously, I'm not going to spray this again because I want to keep all that little bit of detail. So I do all the orange, and then I went in and did the pink. So the pink, it gave that a little bit extra there that I had wanted. And just that little bit of detail just made it something extra. And as usual, I still couldn't leave well enough alone and wanted to add some splatters. So after I was done stamping everything, I got out my little towel here to protect most of my work surface. That wasn't good enough. I should have got the big towel out. This is just a small hand towel. And then I just smushed, this is my three things, this is their black licorice dye ink, so same idea. So I just smushed it onto an acrylic block and then got it wet with water and then ran it across the block to create a splatter. And flicking it against the edge of the block gives a bit more control rather than tapping it against my fingers. That's a tip I'd picked up from Christina Warner a few months ago, which I thought was brilliant. But even with that, you can see I got it everywhere. I had it all over my hands, all over my work surface. I had black splatter everywhere. I made such a mess. However, because this is a dye ink, I was able to remove the bulk of it just with baby wipes. I wiped my hands really, really well and then just wiped off, my acrylic block, cleaned off the brush, wiped down my work surface. Again, dye ink, it does clean up fairly easily. And then I just washed my hands really well in the kitchen sink with soap and water, and that got off the bulk of it. And as of now, like it's late at night now that I'm doing my voiceover, most of the ink splatters are off my hands. So I know some people it really bothers them. I don't mind ink on my hands at all. If it really bugs you, you could wear, gloves if you want. I don't mind ink on my hands. I do not like adhesive, like sticky on my hands. Oh, it drives me nuts. But ink and paint don't bother me. So anyway, I let everything completely dry this time and then ran these through my die cut machine with the largest die from MFT's wonky stitched rectangle set, which I absolutely love. So I die cut all those, and then I die cut a ton of because words. This is from the Because You stamp set and Coordinating Dynamics die. I die cut 6 in white, and then I die cut 12 more in Orange Zest cardstock, because I wanted to stack these, and I just thought it'd be kind of cool to have, instead of just stacking 3 white pieces together, I'm going to stack 2 orange and then add a white on top. It just gives it that little extra something. And trust me, I tried before this off camera. I did try adhering a piece to some craft foam and die cutting it. I was able to die cut it, shockingly. I've said before I struggle with it, but I did that, and then I took my kids out to the local spray park. We did some stuff this afternoon, all that kind of stuff. I came back several hours later. It was still flat as a pancake. Like, I don't know. I don't have the luck with the craft foam. So that's when I was like, you know what? Whatever. I'm just going to die cut a ton of these and adhere the manual. That's fine. I could have used stick-it adhesive, the adhesive sheets, but honestly, doing this many, you're either fiddling and peeling off the adhesive and all that kind of stuff and then adhering it, or you do it this way. So either way, in my opinion, it ends up being the same amount of time. So I just used my multimedia matte adhesive and stacked all those together, and yeah, just got them done. And then after I'd done that, I have that, like I said, that coordinating stamp set. This is the Because You stamp set. And I had this large piece of black cardstock and had the rather brilliant idea of pulling out my MISTI and I was planning on using pretty much all the sentiments from the set, since I'm making basically a card set. So I lined them all up with my MISTI so that I could stamp them all at once, rather than stamping each individual sentiment and embossing it like I wanted to do and taking 10 times more time. I was like, I'm going to do this all at once. So lined up all the sentiments I was going to use, and then I coated the black cardstock with my anti-static powder tool. And then I'm going to stamp all these sentiments in one go with Simon Says Stamp clear embossing ink. So ink this up really well. And then I can press that down, stamp all of it, and then I can coat this entire piece with some detail white embossing powder. And in the end, I only re-stamped the, I think it's You're Amazing, and what was the other one? You're the Best. Those are the only 2 I re-stamped because I needed to have 6 altogether. So did all this and then coated it all with my detail white embossing powder, heated it all at once with my heat tool, and then quickly re-stamped those last 2 sentiments there. And then I removed that anti-static powder with just rubbing my hands around it. And then finally, I just used my paper trimmer to trim all these out. So I've got all my sentiments for all these cards all done in basically one step. So once I was done trimming everything out with my paper trimmer, I am going to go on and start creating all the actual card bases for these cards. And same thing, I do everything in steps all at the same time. It makes this go a lot faster. And even though this was a big card set and I did spend a lot of time on it today, to do 6 individual cards would have taken me way, way longer. So doing it in steps just makes things easier. So for the card bases, I just took the full sheets of cardstock, scored them at the 5.5 inch mark. So I scored them in half and then cut them in half and then folded them and pressed down the seal with my Teflon bone folder, and I had all my card bases done at once. And then since I had them done, I pulled out the stamps again and stamped the inside. This time I stamped everything off once onto scratch paper, so I have the 2nd generation stamping, just so it's a little bit lighter, so that you can easily write over it with a ballpoint pen and the ink isn't too vibrant to be able to see what you're writing. But the detail stamps I stamped as is, just to give it that little extra something, because, I just couldn't leave well enough alone. Plus, I just thought I love the detail stamps in this set. I love how they just finish it off. So I did all that, and I did the same thing. I did it all in steps. So I got all the insides done. And then I took all the large sentiments that I wanted to go on the insides and adhered those to all of the insides of the card, so that all the card bases are done and all the insides are done all at once. So I just used my Tombow Mono Multi and adhered each one of the sentiments right over that stamping I did on the inside of each of the cards. And then I can set those aside to just let that adhesive dry, which doesn't take very long. So once I've got that, I can go now on to finishing off the fronts of the cards. So I'm just going to adhere all these stacked because words with the same multi-medium matte adhesive. And I don't bother coating like every little spot. I just add adhesive to like the larger areas of each of these die cuts. And I find that's more than enough to adhere these into place. So every one I do, I stack it on top of the next one and just put an acrylic block on top so that it's got the pressure, so that there's even pressure, so that these do adhere well to the card front. And then for these little sentiments that I had stamped and embossed, I trimmed those down with scissors, and then I just grabbed some foam tape and I trimmed that down as well because these are pretty narrow, and coated the backs of all of these sentiments with a little strip of foam tape. And then once I've got all of those done, I can peel off the backings of those and adhere them to each card front. So just going in the motions at this point, it's just quick and easy. Adhere each one right above the because word. And then once I've got that done, I can go on and adhere all of these to my actual card bases. And for this, I did have kind of a general idea of what words I wanted to go with what insides, like you're the best because, et cetera, et cetera. Like I love you because I can totally be myself with you. So this is where I made sure to kind of match up what I wanted each card to say. So I took out each card base, figured out which one I wanted to go with it with this set because it's all coordinating. It's pretty simple, really. But made sure I had everything kind of picked out ahead of time, and then I can go on and adhere all the card fronts all at once. So just keeping it going and quick and easy as possible anyway. So I adhered all the card fronts to the card bases just with my ATG adhesive. I did think about putting, more foam tape, but I'm like, that's going to take even longer, and I knew I was going to add some embellishments to this. You could just leave it like this, and they're just gorgeous with the splatters and the watercolor look and all that, but you guys know me, I always got to add something. So I had this cupcake doodle twine still sitting on my desk from that last little card, those flamingo cards I made and posted the other day. So I still had this sitting here, and it was the perfect shade of pink. So I was like, ooh, I'm going to use this and tie twine on all my cards. So I cut all the twine at the same time for all these cards at the same length, and then tied it in a bow, and I was using my reverse tweezers here to hold it in place because with the twine, it works to kind of form your bow and keep everything loose, and then once you're happy with it, then pull it tight, because the way it's twisted, it could end up looking really weird, and you could fiddle with it forever. And I've tied hundreds, thousands of bows. I've got videos on my YouTube channel about that, but yeah, the reverse tweezers make a huge, huge difference. Highly recommend them. So I did all the bows on all the cards. And then, of course, as a final little bit, I had to add some sequins. So I grabbed several different pretty pink posh sequins from my stash. And I chose more kind of muted ones. And this is where I pulled the pink in just a little bit more. And not anything too crazy. So I just used some pink blush, the 4mm and the 6mm, and then some 6mm marshmallow ones, those are the medium-sized ones, and then just a few of the sparkling clear 4mm, and just kind of scatter them somewhat randomly over each card and adhere them into place with my multimedia matte adhesive, and that finished off the card set. So like I said in some point in the video, I will have these pictures on my blog where you can check them out, as well as links to all the supplies used. So you can check that out in the description box below the video if you are interested. Thank you guys so much for watching, subscribing, and thumbs upping my videos, and I will see you all very soon in the next one. Bye!